The space around New Terra looked like a graveyard of broken dreams and shattered metal. Pieces of Zephyrian warships drifted slowly through the darkness, while emergency beacons flashed desperately from escape pods scattered across the system. What had been a perfect fleet of 200 advanced vessels was now mostly debris and survivors clinging to life in the cold vacuum of space. Jake Morrison guided his fighter back toward the New Terra spaceport with hands that shook from exhaustion and adrenaline. His ship's systems were running on emergency power after the massive electromagnetic pulse he had generated to disrupt the alien fleet. Warning lights blinked red across his control panel, but the wildfire was still flying, and that was more than most of the Zephyrian ships could claim. "Wildfire, this is Control," came Captain Lisa Carter's voice through his headset. "Outstanding work out there. Begin immediate approach for emergency landing. Medical teams are standing by." Jake checked his fuel levels and saw that he had maybe 10 minutes of power remaining. "Copy. Control. Beginning final approach now. Phoenix and Eagle, what is your status?" Alex Turner's voice came back tired but triumphant. "Phoenix is green. Across the board. Wildfire. Eagle took some damage from debris, but Maria is bringing her home safely." As Jake's fighter touched down on the landing pad, he could see crowds of colonists gathering around the spaceport. People were cheering and crying with relief as they realized that their impossible situation had somehow become an incredible victory. Children who had been hiding in shelters were now running through the streets, while their parents hugged each other and stared up at the alien debris falling like shooting stars through New Terra's atmosphere. Admiral Kessatar floated in his escape pod and watched his flagship burning in the distance. The mighty vessel that had carried him to victory on dozens of worlds was now a twisted wreck that would never fly again. Around him, hundreds of other escape pods contained the survivors of what should have been the easiest conquest in Zephyrian military history. The Admiral activated his emergency communicator and tried to contact the human colony. He needed to understand what had happened to his fleet and how a single primitive pilot had destroyed an entire battle group using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. "Captain Carter, this is Admiral Kessatar," he transmitted from his failing life support pod. "I request immediate assistance for my surviving crew members and permission to discuss terms of surrender." Captain Carter sat in the New Terra Command Center and stared at the communication request from the alien admiral who had threatened to destroy her colony just hours earlier. The situation was so incredible that she almost wondered if she was dreaming. "Admiral Kessatar, this is Captain Carter," she replied after a moment of stunned silence. "We are dispatching rescue ships to assist your survivors. Please transmit the locations of all escape pods so we can coordinate search and rescue operations." Jake climbed out of his fighter and was immediately surrounded by medical technicians checking him for injuries and exhaustion. His body felt like he had been through a washing machine, but his mind was still racing with everything he had learned about the aliens during the battle. "Jake, are you hurt?" Captain Carter asked as she approached the landing pad. "I am fine, Captain," Jake replied while pulling off his helmet. "Just tired and trying to process what happened up there. Those aliens had incredible technology, but they fight like machines following a computer program. When we did something their computers could not predict, their whole system fell apart." Dr. Sarah Kim, the colony's chief medical officer, finished her examination of Jake and stepped back with a satisfied expression. "You are exhausted and dehydrated, but otherwise healthy. I recommend rest and plenty of fluids for the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, rescue ships from New Terra were racing toward the escape pods scattered throughout the system. The colonists who had been preparing for evacuation just hours earlier, were now saving the lives of the aliens who had come to conquer them. Lieutenant Danny Ross coordinated the rescue operations from the communications center. Rescue Ship Alpha. We have located a cluster of 15 escape pods near coordinates 77 Mark IV. Emergency medical supplies may be required. Copy, Control. Rescue Ship Alpha is en route to pod cluster. We are prepared to render assistance to alien survivors. Admiral Kessatar was pulled from his escape pod by human rescue workers who treated him with professional courtesy despite everything that had happened. As he was brought aboard the rescue ship, he found himself face to face with the same species he had dismissed as harmless primitives just that morning. "Admiral, I am Commander Steve Walsh," said the human officer leading the rescue team. "You are safe now. Our medical staff will treat any injuries you or your crew may have sustained." Kessatar looked around the human rescue ship and saw his own officers being cared for by the same people he had planned to relocate to refugee camps. The irony was not lost on him, and for the first time in his long military career, he felt genuine shame about his actions. Several hours later, Admiral Kessatar sat in the New Terra medical facility and waited for his meeting with Captain Carter and the pilot who had destroyed his fleet. His injuries were minor, but his pride would take much longer to heal. Around him, Zephyrian and human medical staff worked together to treat the wounded from both sides. Jake Morrison entered the medical facility still wearing his flight suit and looking like he had not slept in days. When he saw Admiral Kessatar, he approached with a curious expression rather than the anger or contempt the Admiral expected. "Admiral, I am Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison," Jake said while extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I wanted to check on your condition and discuss what happened during our engagement." Admiral Kessatar looked at the young human pilot and tried to reconcile this polite, concerned individual with the tactical genius who had outmaneuvered his entire fleet. "Commander Morrison, I must admit that I do not understand how you accomplished what you did today. Your tactics violated every principle of military doctrine I have studied in 3 centuries of service." Jake sat down in a chair next to the Admiral's medical bed and considered his words carefully. "Admiral, I think the problem was that your people analyzed our technology and assumed you understood how we think. But humans do not always think logically, especially when we are protecting something we care about. We adapt and improvise in ways that computers cannot predict." Captain Carter joined them in the medical facility along with several other human officers and a few recovering Zephyrian commanders. The room was crowded with individuals from 2 different species who had been shooting at each other just hours earlier. "Admiral Kessatar," Captain Carter began, "we need to discuss the situation between our peoples. Your fleet came here to take our world, but now you are our prisoners and guests. We want to find a peaceful solution that benefits everyone." Admiral Kessatar looked around the room at the humans who had defeated him and realized something important. These people could have let his escape pods drift in space until their life support failed. They could have executed him as a war criminal or demanded huge payments for the return of his surviving crew. Instead, they were offering to negotiate a peaceful resolution. "Captain Carter, Commander Morrison, I believe my people made a serious error in our assessment of humanity," the Admiral admitted. "We measured your threat level based on your technology and your preference for peaceful solutions. We failed to understand that preferring peace does not mean being incapable of war." Jake nodded in agreement. "Admiral, humans have a saying that it is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. We prefer to build and explore and create, but when someone threatens what we love, we can be very dangerous opponents. Over the following days, Admiral Kessitar worked with Captain Carter and Jake Morrison to establish communication with the Zephyrian government and explain what had happened at New Terra. The news that a single human pilot had destroyed an entire battle fleet spread throughout the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Species across known space began reassessing their intelligence about humanity and wondering what other harmless peoples they had underestimated. The Zephyrian Empire, faced with the reality that their military doctrine was vulnerable to unconventional tactics, began reaching out to other governments to establish formal diplomatic relations rather than simply taking what they wanted. Jake Morrison found himself reluctantly famous as the pilot who had changed galactic politics overnight. Military academies from dozens of worlds requested copies of the battle recordings to study human tactical innovation. But Jake preferred to return to his routine patrols around New Terra, flying missions that were once again peaceful and boring. The final agreement between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire established formal diplomatic relations and created a technology-sharing program that benefited both species. Human creativity and adaptability combined with Zephyrian engineering knowledge led to advances that neither people could have achieved alone. Admiral Kessitar returned to his home world with a new understanding of warfare and diplomacy. He established the first Zephyrian military academy focused on studying unconventional tactics, and the Admiral Kessitar stood on his command bridge and checked the time display on his control panel. The humans had been given 1 hour to consider surrender, and 58 minutes had passed without any response from Captain Carter. The Admiral's patience was running out, and he decided it was time to apply more pressure. Commander Zeth All, deploy Battle Group 7 for limited engagement, Kessitar ordered. Target their military installations only. Disable their defensive systems and show them that continued resistance is pointless. 50 Zephyrian warships broke away from the main fleet and moved toward New Terra in perfect formation. Each ship was larger than the human colony's entire spaceport, and their combined firepower could reduce the settlement to ash in minutes. But Admiral Kessitar wanted prisoners, not corpses, so he had ordered his captains to use restraint. Jake Morrison watched the approaching alien ships from the cockpit of his fighter and felt sweat running down his face inside his helmet. 50 ships was more than enough to destroy everything he cared about, but something about their approach pattern caught his attention. The aliens were flying in the same organized formation they had maintained since arriving in the system. Phoenix. Eagle, are you seeing this? Jake called to his wingmates over the communication system. Yeah. Wildfire, Alex Turner replied from his fighter nearby. They are moving like they are in some kind of parade. Very pretty, very organized. Maria Santos, flying the Eagle, had more experience reading tactical situations than either of her colleagues. Wildfire, Phoenix, look at their spacing and timing. They are maintaining exact distances between ships and changing course in synchronized waves. It is like watching a dance performance. Jake studied the alien formation more carefully and began to see what Maria meant. Every ship moved in perfect coordination with its neighbors, following patterns that were probably programmed into their navigation computers. It was an impressive display of military discipline, but it also meant their movements could be predicted if someone understood the pattern. Captain Carter, this is Wildfire, Jake called to the colony command center. Request permission to engage the approaching enemy ships. There was a long pause before Carter responded. Wildfire, you are outnumbered 50-1 by ships that are each more powerful than our entire defensive grid. What exactly do you plan to accomplish? Jake looked at the alien fleet and made a decision that would either save the colony or get him killed in the next few minutes. Captain, I want to test a theory about how these aliens think and fight. They seem to expect us to behave in predictable ways, so I am going to do something unpredictable. Captain Carter knew Jake well enough to trust his judgment, even when his plan sounded crazy. All right, Wildfire. You have permission to engage, but Phoenix and Eagle will maintain defensive positions around the colony. Jake pushed his fighter's throttles to maximum power and accelerated directly toward the center of the alien formation. His sensors immediately detected targeting systems locking onto his ship as dozens of alien weapons prepared to fire. Any sane pilot would have turned away or tried to use evasive maneuvers, but Jake did something that no one expected. He began flying in completely random patterns. Jake rolled his fighter upside down, then spiraled in a tight corkscrew, then suddenly reversed direction and flew sideways relative to the alien ships. His movements had no tactical purpose and followed no logical pattern that any military computer could analyze or predict. On the Zephyrian command ships, tactical officers stared at their displays in confusion. Their targeting computers were designed to track enemy vessels by predicting their most likely course changes based on tactical doctrine and physics. But Jake's fighter was not following any doctrine they had ever encountered. What is the human pilot doing? Demanded Captain Vorthak of the destroyer leading Battle Group 7. My weapons cannot maintain target lock on a ship that flies without purpose. Lieutenant Kexin checked his sensor readings again. Sir, the human appears to be... I am not sure how to describe it. He is flying as if he has no destination and no tactical objective. My computer systems cannot calculate intercept courses because there is no logical pattern to predict. Jake continued his chaotic flight path while carefully observing how the alien ships responded to his movements. When he turned left, they adjusted their formation to compensate. When he climbed, they repositioned to maintain firing solutions. When he suddenly dove and spun in 3 directions at once, their entire formation had to shift to keep track of him. Most importantly, Jake was learning about their weapon systems. Every time the aliens tried to lock onto his fighter, he could see the energy patterns of their targeting scanners. When they prepared to fire, power levels spiked in predictable ways. Their technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also designed to fight opponents who followed standard tactical procedures. Phoenix, Eagle, are you watching this? Jake called to his wingmates while performing a barrel roll that served no purpose except to confuse alien gunners. We see it, Wildfire, Maria replied. Their formation is shifting to track your position, but they are having trouble maintaining firing solutions. Alex added his own observations. Wildfire, their weapon systems seem to be cycling through different targeting modes. I think they are trying to figure out how to hit a target that moves randomly. Jake smiled inside his helmet as he executed another impossible maneuver that sent his fighter tumbling end over end through space. Phoenix, Eagle, coordinate with ground control and prepare defensive crossfire patterns. I am going to try something even crazier. Captain Carter watched the tactical display in the colony command center and tried to understand what Jake was accomplishing with his aerial circus act. His fighter was still vastly outgunned and outnumbered, but somehow he was keeping 50. Alien warships confused and unable to fire effectively. Ground defense teams, this is Control, Carter called to the missile launcher crews positioned around the colony. Prepare to engage alien ships on my command. Target the vessels that move into predictable positions to avoid Wildfire's flight path. Jake had been studying the alien formation for several minutes and was beginning to see deeper patterns in how they moved. When he flew toward their left flank, ships on the right side of the formation adjusted position to maintain overall spacing. When he dove below their formation, ships above compensated by spreading out to maintain coverage. The aliens were so concerned with maintaining perfect formation that they were making themselves predictable in different ways. Jake began flying specific patterns designed to force the alien ships into positions where the colony's ground-based weapons could target them effectively. "Ground control, this is Wildfire," Jake called while spinning his fighter in a spiral that pulled 3 alien destroyers into a tight cluster. "Firing Solution Alpha is ready on your mark. Copy, Wildfire. Engaging Target Cluster Alpha. 12 missiles launched from hidden positions around the New Terra colony and streaked toward the clustered alien ships. The Zephyrian vessels detected the incoming projectiles and activated their defensive systems, but they were positioned too close together to maneuver effectively without risking collision. The missiles struck energy shields and exploded harmlessly, but the alien ships were forced to break formation to avoid damage. For the first time since arriving in the system, the perfect Zephyrian battle formation showed gaps and disorder. Admiral Kessatar watched the tactical display on his flagship and felt something he had not experienced in years of conquest: confusion. One human fighter pilot was somehow disrupting his entire attack formation by flying in patterns that made no tactical sense. "Admiral, Battle Group 7 reports difficulty maintaining formation integrity," Commander Zethal reported. "The human pilot's erratic behavior is forcing our ships into suboptimal positions." "One pilot," Admiral Kessatar said slowly, "one pilot in a primitive fighter is causing problems for 50 of our warships." Jake continued his seemingly random flight pattern, while Alex Turner and Maria Santos moved into supporting positions. The 3 human fighters began working together in ways that the alien computers found impossible to predict or counter. When Jake dove toward an alien ship, Alex would climb to attack from above, forcing the enemy vessel to choose between 2 targets moving in opposite directions. When Maria flew straight at an enemy formation, Jake would spiral around her flight path, creating a double helix pattern that no targeting computer could track effectively. Captain Vorthak of the lead destroyer found himself in the embarrassing position of commanding 50 warships that could not hit 3 tiny fighters. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead human fighter. Ignore tactical doctrine and simply overwhelm his position with maximum firepower." 20 alien ships opened fire simultaneously, filling space around Jake's fighter with energy beams and plasma bolts. But Jake was no longer where their targeting computers expected him to be. He had suddenly changed from random movements to a carefully planned evasive pattern that took him through gaps in the enemy fire. The alien weapons struck empty space while Jake's fighter emerged unharmed from the barrage. Even worse for the Zephyrians, their concentrated fire had forced them to cluster their ships so tightly that several vessels suffered minor damage from near misses. Admiral Kessatar watched his 50 warships pull back from the human fighters and felt humiliation burning in his chest like acid. In 300 years of military service, he had never seen a battle formation disrupted by such a small force, using such impossible tactics. The human pilots fought like they were insane, with no regard for proper strategy or tactical doctrine. "Admiral, all ships are now at safe bombardment distance," Commander Zethal reported from his position at the tactical station. "We can destroy the human colony with minimal risk to our fleet." Kessatar stared at the tactical display showing 3 tiny human fighters still flying their chaotic patterns in the space between his fleet and the colony. Part of him wanted to order the bombardment immediately and end this embarrassing situation, But another part of his mind was fascinated by what he had witnessed. "Commander, bring the entire fleet into bombardment formation," the Admiral ordered. "I want overwhelming firepower focused on the human colony. These primitives have shown that they cannot be reasoned with, so we will demonstrate the consequences of defying the Zephyrian Empire." 200 alien warships moved into perfect firing positions around New Terra, their massive weapons charging with energy that made space itself ripple with distortion fields. Each ship carried enough firepower to crack a moon, and together they could reduce the human colony to molten rock in seconds. Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet reposition and felt his heart sink. His unconventional tactics had worked against the smaller attack force, but there was no way 3 fighters could disrupt 200 ships spread across such a wide formation. The aliens had learned from their mistake and were no longer giving him the chance to exploit their predictable movements. "Captain Carter, this is Wildfire," Jake called to the colony command center. "The entire alien fleet is moving into bombardment positions. We have maybe 5 minutes before they open fire." Captain Carter's voice came back tight with stress. "Copy Wildfire. All fighters are ordered to withdraw to minimum safe distance. There is nothing more you can do against those odds." Jake looked at his fuel gauges and weapon systems and realized that Captain Carter was probably right. His fighter had been flying at maximum power for over an hour, and his energy reserves were running low, even if he could somehow reach the alien fleet. His weapons were too weak to damage their advanced shields and armor. But as Jake prepared to withdraw, he noticed something about the alien formation that made him pause. The Zephyrian ships were positioning themselves in another perfect geometric pattern, with precise spacing and synchronized movements. They had learned to spread out enough to avoid the clustering problems that had plagued their earlier attack, but they were still following rigid tactical doctrine. "Phoenix, Eagle, are you seeing the alien formation pattern?" Jake asked his wingmates. Alex Turner checked his sensor displays and replied, "Yeah, Wildfire. They are arranged in a perfect sphere around the colony with equal spacing between all ships. Very organized, very symmetrical," Maria Santos added her own observation. "Wildfire, look at their shield harmonics. All ships are operating their defensive systems on the same frequency patterns to create overlapping coverage. Very efficient, but also very synchronized." Jake felt a crazy idea forming in his mind as he studied the alien fleet's energy signatures. The Zephyrian ships were not just positioned in perfect formation. They were operating as a single coordinated system. Their shields were synchronized, their weapons were coordinated, and their movements followed unified patterns controlled by central computers. "Captain Carter, this is Wildfire," Jake called while his mind raced through calculations. "I need you to transmit every piece of technical data we have about electromagnetic interference and shield disruption techniques." "Wildfire! We already gave them all our technical specifications," Carter replied. "They know everything about our capabilities." Jake smiled grimly inside his helmet. "Exactly, Captain. They think they know everything about us, which means they are not expecting us to do anything new. Please transmit the interference data and prepare for emergency power shutdown of all colony systems." Captain Carter did not understand Jake's plan, but she had learned to trust his instincts. "All stations, prepare for emergency power shutdown on my command. Wildfire, you have your data transmission." Jake received the technical files about electromagnetic warfare and began programming his fighter's communication system for a very different purpose than it was designed for. Instead of sending messages, he was going to turn his radio transmitter into the most powerful jamming device ever created by human technology. "Phoenix, Eagle, I need you to coordinate with ground control for synchronized missile strikes. Jake ordered while making final preparations. When I give the signal, I want every weapon we have fired at specific target points I am transmitting to you now. Alex and Maria received Jake's targeting data and saw that he wanted them to attack ammunition storage ships positioned at key points in the alien formation. It seemed like suicide to attack such heavily defended targets, but they had learned to trust Jake's tactical genius. Jake pushed his fighter's engines to maximum emergency power and accelerated directly toward the center of the alien fleet. His sensors immediately detected hundreds of targeting systems locking onto his ship as the entire Zephyrian fleet prepared to vaporize him. "Human fighter, you will withdraw immediately or be destroyed," came Admiral Kessitar's voice over the communication system. "Admiral, this is Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison," Jake replied while flying straight toward the most heavily defended section of the alien formation. "I have a message for you about human tactical capabilities." Jake activated his modified communication system and began broadcasting on every frequency his fighter could generate. But instead of sending words, he was transmitting carefully calculated electromagnetic pulses designed to interfere with Zephyrian shield harmonics. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Jake had studied the alien shield systems during the earlier engagement and discovered that they operated on fixed frequencies to maintain perfect synchronization across the fleet. When his jamming signal hit those exact frequencies, it created a feedback loop that cascaded through the entire defensive network. One by one, Zephyrian ships began losing shield power as their defensive systems tried to compensate for interference they could not filter out. The synchronized shield network that had been their greatest strength became their greatest weakness as the disruption spread from ship to ship through their own coordination systems. "Admiral, we are experiencing fleet-wide shield failures," Commander Zethal reported in panic. "All ships are showing critical system errors in their defensive networks." Admiral Kessitar watched his perfectly organized fleet dissolve into chaos as ship after ship reported shield collapses and system malfunctions. "How is one human fighter disrupting our entire fleet?" Jake flew through the heart of the alien formation, while continuing his electromagnetic assault on their systems. He could see Zephyrian ships trying to re-establish their shields, but every time they synchronized their frequencies, his jamming signal found the resonance point and crashed their systems again. "Phoenix Eagle, execute firing plan now," Jake called, while dodging desperate shots from alien ships that could no longer coordinate their targeting. Alex Turner and Maria Santos, supported by every missile launcher on New Terra, opened fire on the alien ammunition ships that Jake had identified in his targeting data. The Zephyrian vessels, blinded by system failures and unable to maintain proper defensive formations, could not intercept the incoming projectiles. The first human missile struck a Zephyrian ammunition ship and triggered a... Captain Jake Morrison stared out the small window of the human transport ship as it approached the massive space station ahead. The station was bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. Its metal walls stretched for miles in every direction, and strange lights blinked along its surface like stars. This was Concordia Prime, the center of galactic government for over 3,000 years. Jake felt nervous but tried not to show it. Behind him sat Dr. Lisa Campbell, a smart woman who knew everything about alien cultures. Next to her was Commander Ryan Torres, the head of their security team. They were the first humans ever invited to speak before the Galactic Council. It was supposed to be an honor, but Jake worried it might be a trap. The docking bay was huge and filled with ships from many different worlds. Some ships looked like giant crystals, while others seemed to be alive and breathing. Jake had studied pictures of alien vessels, but seeing them in person made his stomach twist. Everything here was so different from Earth. 3 alien guards met them at the airlock. The guards were tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms each. They did not speak but pointed toward a long hallway. Jake and his team followed quietly. The walls of the station were covered in symbols that hurt to look at. The air smelled like metal and something sweet that made Jake feel dizzy. The hallway seemed to go on forever. Other aliens walked past them without looking. Some floated instead of walking. Others moved on too many legs to count. Jake tried to remember his training about not staring, but it was hard. These beings were unlike anything on Earth. Finally, they reached a massive circular room with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. In the center was a raised platform surrounded by 12 tall chairs. Each chair was different and seemed designed for a different type of alien. This was the council chamber where the fate of entire worlds was decided. The 12 council members were already in their seats. Jake recognized some of them from his studies. The Zephyrians looked like living crystals that reflected light in strange colors. Their leader, Vexitar, was the largest crystal and spoke in a voice like breaking glass. The Molari were covered in tentacles and had no solid shape. Elder Silthis was their speaker, and her voice sounded like water flowing over rocks. The Krathen looked like giant insects with sharp claws and wings that buzzed when they moved. A small platform rose from the floor in front of the council. Jake and his team stepped onto it. The platform felt warm under their feet and hummed with energy. All 12 aliens stared down at them. Their eyes were very different from human eyes, but Jake could feel their judgment. Vextar spoke first. His crystal body flashed with angry red light as he talked. So these are the humans we have heard about. They come from a small world at the edge of our galaxy. They have only just learned to travel between stars, and now they want to join our ancient council. Elder Silthis laughed, and the sound made Jake's skin crawl. Look at how they stand. So rigid and afraid. They carry weapons even here in our sacred chamber. Do they not trust the wisdom of beings who ruled the stars before their world was even born? Jake had practiced his speech many times, but now his mouth felt dry. He cleared his throat and began to speak. Honored council members, we come from Earth seeking friendship and partnership. We offer our knowledge and skills to help build a better galaxy for all beings. The insect-like Krathen representative clicked his mandibles in what Jake hoped was not laughter. Partnership. They speak of partnership when they know nothing of galactic law or custom. Tell us, human, what do you know of justice? Dr. Campbell stepped forward slightly. She had studied this moment for months. On Earth, we believe that justice comes from careful study of facts and fair treatment of all parties. We have courts where evidence is presented and judges make decisions based on truth. This caused several council members to make sounds that were clearly mocking. Vextar's crystal body turned bright yellow. Courts, judges, these are the words of children playing games. True justice comes from algorithms that have been perfected over millennia. There is no need for your emotional displays. Commander Torres tensed beside Jake. The soldier was not used to being insulted, and Jake could see his jaw clench. But they had agreed to stay calm no matter what happened. Elder Silthis moved her tentacles in patterns that hurt to watch. Your species amuses us human. You speak of democracy where every voice matters. How chaotic and inefficient. Strong beings lead and weak beings follow. This is the natural order that brings peace to the galaxy. Jake tried again. We believe that all intelligent beings have rights that must be protected. On Earth, we have learned that diversity makes us stronger. Different ideas help us solve problems in new ways. The council chamber filled with sounds like breaking glass, rushing water and buzzing wings as the aliens expressed their amusement. Jake felt heat rise in his face, but forced himself to stay calm. A new voice spoke from high above. It belonged to a being Jake had not seen before. This alien looked like a cloud of gas, with lights floating inside it. Rights, problems, new ways. These humans think in such simple terms. They do not understand that order comes from acceptance of hierarchy. Some species are born to rule while others exist to serve. Jake felt his team growing angry beside him, but he raised his hand slightly to keep them quiet. This was not going as they had hoped, but they needed to finish what they came to do. Vextar's crystal form grew brighter. We have heard enough of human philosophy. Your world is too young and your people too primitive to understand galactic governance. You may observe our proceedings as a learning experience, but you will have no voice in our decisions. Dr. Campbell spoke up, despite Jake's warning look. But surely our different perspective could offer valuable insights. Earth has solved many conflicts through negotiation and compromise. The laughter that followed was cruel and cold. Elder Silthis waved her tentacles dismissively. Negotiation is what weak species do when they cannot enforce their will. Compromise shows that neither side was truly right. We have moved beyond such inefficient methods. Jake realized that everything they had prepared was useless. These beings saw humans as nothing more than entertaining primitives. They had traveled across the galaxy hoping to find friends and allies, but instead found judges who had already decided humans were inferior. The Krathan speaker buzzed his wings loudly. Observer status is generous given your species' limited development. Perhaps in a few centuries you will begin to understand the wisdom of true galactic law. Until then, you will watch and learn from your betters. Jake felt defeat settling in his chest like a heavy stone. All their hopes and dreams were being crushed by beings who would not even listen to what humans had to offer. But as he looked at his team, he saw something else in their eyes. Not defeat, but determination. Dr. Campbell was already taking notes. Commander Torres was studying the council members like a soldier planning his next move. Maybe they had lost this battle, but Jake realized the war was far from over. These aliens thought humans were weak and primitive. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Jake Morrison sat in the small quarters assigned to the human delegation and stared at the stack of data tablets covering his desk. 3 months had passed since their humiliating introduction to the Galactic Council, and he was no closer to understanding how to change their minds. The aliens had given them access to the station's legal archives, but the information was overwhelming and often made no sense. Dr. Lisa Campbell knocked on his door before entering. She looked tired and frustrated. Dark circles under her eyes showed. She had been working too hard again. In her arms, she carried more tablets and data crystals filled with galactic law records. I found something disturbing in the legal precedents, she said as she set the materials on his desk. The current system is not about justice at all. It is about maintaining power for the strongest species while keeping everyone else in line. Jake leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. The artificial gravity on the station was slightly different from Earth, and it gave him constant headaches. Show me what you found. Lisa activated one of the tablets, and strange symbols filled the screen. After months of study, Jake could read some of the galactic script, but it still hurt his eyes. Look at these cases from the past century. Every Single dispute between strong and weak species ended the same way. The strong species won regardless of the facts. She scrolled through dozens of legal decisions. In each case, the pattern was identical. Powerful aliens like the Zephyrians or Krathen made demands, and smaller species were forced to comply. There were no investigations or trials. The council simply declared what would happen, and everyone was expected to obey. Commander Ryan Torres entered the room carrying his daily security report. The soldier had adapted better than anyone to life on the station. He treated each day like a reconnaissance mission, gathering intelligence about their alien hosts. "The Luminian delegate asked to speak with us again today," he said. "That is the 5th time this week." Jake had noticed the Luminians during council sessions. They were small, peaceful beings who looked almost human except for their silver skin and large, dark eyes. They rarely spoke during meetings, and when they did, the council barely listened. Several other minor species seemed to be treated the same way. "What do they want?" Jake asked. Ryan shrugged. "They will not say, but they seem desperate. I think they are afraid of being overheard by council security." Lisa looked up from her tablet with excitement in her eyes. "Maybe we should meet with them privately. If smaller species are being oppressed, they might be willing to help us understand how the system really works." Jake considered this carefully. The council had made it clear that humans were only observers. Getting involved in political disputes between other species could get them expelled from the station, but they needed allies if they ever hoped to change anything. That evening, Jake and his team met the Luminian delegate in a rarely used observation deck. The Luminian's name was something Jake could not pronounce, so they called him Silver. The being was nervous and kept looking over his shoulder as if expecting council guards to appear. "Your species speaks of justice and rights," Silver said in accented but clear English. "Do you truly believe such things are possible?" "We do more than believe," Lisa replied. "On Earth, we have built entire civilizations around those ideas." Silver's large eyes grew even wider. "On my world, we once had such dreams, but the Council taught us that dreams are dangerous. Now we exist only to serve the greater species." Jake felt anger building in his chest. "What happened to your people?" Silver was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "We were explorers like you. We discovered new worlds and shared their resources with everyone. The Council said this was inefficient. They decided the Krathen should control our worlds because they were stronger. My people became workers in their mines and factories." Ryan leaned forward. "How many species have been treated this way?" "More than you can count," Silver replied. "The Koreth were once proud warriors, but they lost a war centuries ago. Now they serve as slaves to whoever the Council assigns them to. The Valons were scientists who questioned Council decisions. They were stripped of their technology and forbidden to leave their home system." Lisa was taking notes as fast as she could write. "This is systematic oppression on a scale we never imagined. How has it continued for so long?" Silver looked around nervously again. "Because resistance is impossible. The Council has weapons that can destroy entire star systems. They have surveillance that watches every world. Most importantly, they have convinced everyone that this is the natural order. Strong beings rule and weak beings serve." Jake stood up and walked to the observation window. Outside, he could see dozens of alien ships docked at the station. He had thought they represented a peaceful community of different species working together. Now he realized they were more like prison ships bringing tribute to their masters. "What about the Council members themselves?" he asked. "Are they all equally powerful?" Silver made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. Even among the 12, there is hierarchy. The Zephyrians and Molari make most decisions. The others follow or risk losing their positions. I have heard rumors that some council species were once independent, but were absorbed into the ruling group to avoid destruction. This was valuable information, but Jake needed to know more. Are there any laws or procedures that could be used to challenge the system? Silver thought for a moment. There are ancient rules about dispute resolution. If a species can prove they have been wronged according to galactic law, they may request a formal hearing. But no one has tried this in centuries, because the law is written by the ruling species to protect themselves. Lisa looked up from her notes with excitement. What if someone used those ancient rules in a way the Council did not expect? What if we could turn their own laws against them? Impossible, Silver said immediately. The Council controls every aspect of the legal process. They choose the judges, they interpret the evidence, they decide the punishment. No weak species has ever won a case against a strong one. Jake felt an idea forming in his mind. It was dangerous and probably hopeless, but it might be their only chance. What if the weak species had help from someone the Council underestimated, someone they thought was too primitive to be a threat? Understanding dawned in Silver's large eyes. You mean humans would challenge the Council directly? Not challenge, Jake corrected. We would work within their system, but use methods they have never seen before. Earth has developed ways of finding truth and ensuring fairness that these aliens cannot imagine. Ryan was grinning now. The soldier enjoyed impossible odds. What kind of case would we need? Silver was quiet for so long that Jake thought he would not answer. Finally, he spoke in a voice filled with hope and terror. There is a situation developing that could provide the opportunity you seek. The Krathen have accused an entire Luminian colony of stealing resources from one of their claimed worlds. They demand the death of every colonist as punishment? Lisa gasped. How many beings are we talking about? Over 10,000, Silver replied. Men, women, and children who have done nothing wrong. The execution is scheduled to take place in 30 galactic days unless someone can prove the colony's innocence. Jake felt his heart racing. This was exactly the kind of case where human legal methods could make a difference. But the stakes were terrifying. If they failed, 10,000 innocent beings would die. If they succeeded, they might change the entire galaxy. Would your people be willing to let humans represent them in this case? He asked. Silver looked at him with something like worship in his eyes. If there is even the smallest chance of saving our colony, we will do anything you ask. Jake looked at his team and saw the same determination he felt. They had come to the stars hoping to make friends. Instead, they had found a galaxy where might made right and the weak suffered in silence. It was time to show these ancient aliens what human justice could accomplish. Then we have work to do, he said.